Good afternoon, anti-novelists and friends. Welcome back to this episode of Zettelkasten for fiction writers, where imagination finds order. So, after yesterday's brief look at the editing process and what that long vision of edits looks like, remember, we're still somewhere between the zero draft and the work in progress. So, let's pick up where we left off. I got a question from Shelley about, I have been writing these scenes and I'm not really sure what to do with those cards and material or how that fits in. So let's just get into it right here. I'm going to use the pretend story that we've been writing since you're already familiar with this. So you may recall we have our main character, Jen. We have had to reverse engineer meeting her mom and her boss in order to facilitate the things that happen going forward in the story. So if this were me and I were writing this story, I know a few things need to happen. So let's just break it down. First of all, we know that we need to meet her mom. So I'm going to make myself a scene card. Scene, introduction to mom. And then I'm just going to go through and I'm going to say, okay, what is the goal of that scene? Well, it's to set up this story with her mom. And I'm going to leave myself a note to develop that story, right? So I need to know what's going on with her and her mother and why that's important. How am I going to set that up? I'm going to say at home. So maybe we're going to see her mother at the family home doing something of significance to the story. Now, you can imagine yourself into the weeds for what that might look like, but you get the idea. Maybe she's going through old photos of Jen and she starts thinking about her, and that sets her to thinking about reaching out to her, and that's what brings them together. Could be anything. The outcome is, in that little scenario, let's say mom reaches out, and then maybe they have a meetup. I'm going to say coffee because that would be a sweet little scene to have. And then the sequel. Okay, so you have this scene that's taken place. You need to know the sequel, or what are the consequences? What's the outcome of that scene? The sequel is they grow closer. Okay, because that's what's going to set us up for the other pieces of the story that we need to write when we discover over here that we need to have met her mom back here in order that mom can show up over here and play her role. Okay, so that is a scene card for how we meet her mom. Based on our storyboarding here, our little plot model, we know that this meeting happens fairly early on. So what am I going to grab? I'm going to grab my plot box. Assuming that you're writing a standard 8 plot point Western conflict driven novel, I'm going to look through my plot box. Always thank you to Derek Murphy, because this largely adapts his system from the plot dot for the things that could happen in a story and the order that they could happen in. And I'm going to say, okay, where does this happen? Well, we know it happens in Act 1, no question. So as I look through here, okay, it's not a really bad day, something peculiar, grasping at straws, inciting incident. I'm going to say this probably is going to happen somewhere around the inciting incident, because something is going to spur Jen to action, and we need to already having met her mom in place. So in my plot box, 7003A is the first plot point, the inciting incident. So on this card, I'm just going to label it 7003A. Now, is it necessary to put the number on the card? No, it is not, because this card could move. After I write some more scenes in this introductory material in these early chapters, I might find that, you know what, this actually needs to go after the inciting incident, closer to what's considered the call to adventure, which that's 7004. So you know what I would do? I would simply update my number if I wanted to and drop that card behind 7004. See? So these cards will move around based on how you intend to use them. So if you want to skip the numbering altogether, which putting my novel together, I did not number my early 0 draft. As I was slotting these cards into the plot box where I think they would go, I just dropped the card in. So I'm thinking this goes 7003A. I'm just going to drop it right in behind there. And then that card is slotted in the story where I think it might go, where that scene might fit. So let's do another one. This is an easy one because this is that work meeting. Remember when we get over here and we've got the mentor and the sidekick and the antagonist is revealed, and this all goes down at the meeting at work? Well, then I would fill out this scene card the same way. The scene is a work meeting. The goal is to introduce these people so that I get them established early on. The setup, maybe it is a volatile meeting, right? Maybe there's a little bit of conflict going on there. So I would set that up in my scene. The outcome, remember, Jen has to discover this antagonistic person that is issuing a challenge to her. So both my goal and my outcome is she comes face to face with this antagonistic person. And then the sequel is what happens as a result. Maybe Jen walks away with a better knowledge of herself and of this person who maybe she trusted before and is now having questions about. Okay, so I would just sketch those things out on my scene card. And then, you guessed it, I go back to my plot box and I say, okay, this work meeting happens early on. And actually, if I consider that I'm meeting mom as part of the inciting incident, maybe this happens right after that meeting with mom. There's no reason those scenes couldn't be back to back. Jen has, or excuse me, we're introduced to Jen's mom through this memory scene, this recollection. The two of them have a quick coffee. They seal up that scene growing a little closer, and then bada boom, tension. Jen goes into that work meeting and her antagonist is revealed. And those scenes fit nicely together. See how that worked? I literally just figured that out right now in real time as I was putting them into the plot box. So let's do a third one real quick. Further in on the story. Let's say your scene, you have envisioned a twist somewhere kind of around the midpoint where a problem is revealed, a critical problem that Jen is trying to solve and deal with. Okay, so you know that the sequel, okay, so the outcome, let's call the outcome, is Jen, I can't spell, decides to trust. And the goal of our scene is to reveal this problem. And if you want to draw arrows, if you want to add pictures, add mind maps on these scene cards, whatever makes sense to you. The important thing is this is just getting your thoughts down so that you can write the story. The setup, there needs to be some kind of proper setup where Jen makes this discovery. Okay, so this is just a reminder to myself. The setup needs to be she makes some kind of a discovery, the outcome of which is she decides to trust an ally, and then the sequel, the thing that needs to happen as a result of these things in the scene, is she decides to gather her forces and to extend some trust. So now we see she's starting to adapt to the things that are happening and she's starting to change a bit. So this card, this scene, happens over here, right? Because we still need to get through all of Acts 1 and 2, because for me, this twist, which reveals her problem, which causes her to make this change, in my mind, back to the plot box, this needs to happen around the middle. Game-changing midpoint. What unexpected thing is going to happen? For me, it's going to be an attitudinal twist. It's a twist in her perception of things, which causes her to gather her forces and decide to trust, reach out and trust. So I'm just going to take that little card and I'm going to tuck it right behind the midpoint. That way, as I'm flipping through here, reviewing my story elements, I know that is where that belongs, at least for now. As I've said, this doesn't stay static, okay? This is a working system. So as you're fleshing out those scenes, figuring out what they need to contain and what that story model looks like, you're just taking those little scene cards and you're just putting them in as placeholders to how you think that story is going to unfold. You may come back after you do some writing and go, okay, it doesn't make sense for her to make this discovery and this perspective change at the midpoint. Maybe it makes more sense for her to do that after some kind of a pinch point, after you show the opposition, the antagonistic force on a bigger level. Maybe it's that critical thing that she makes this change in response to. So you would just take that card out of the midpoint section and move it back. That's how you're tracking as you're marking out your scenes. Now, have you started doing writing at this point? Sure, but the important thing is you're using your scene cards in conjunction with the plot box to simply sketch out in your mind's eye what that story looks like, so that when you sit down to write, you have a sense of the flow, okay? All you're looking for in this process is a sense of the flow and how the events and scenes connect together. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, please drop me a line down below. I'm happy to dive further into this or answer any other questions or observations. As always, thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. I will leave you there for this Sunday. I'm going to go get a little bit of writing done, and then we will jump back into the next stages tomorrow, and we'll look at how then you take your character cards and how those become part of that building and mapping out system. So step by step, we will get there together. In the meantime, I will see you tomorrow.